And so here we go. The Beatles again, number 6, I think. This album comes in at number 20 on the best ever albums list of the top albums of the 60s. It was released in 1967, which was ranked number 6 of that year, and it's 85 overall. And this album was actually recorded essentially over the course of a year, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But essentially November 1966 through November of 1967, and it was released on November 27th, 1967. So this represents the third Beatles album in a row that is a movie soundtrack. And unlike the other records that we covered, which were Hard Day's Night and Help, Magical Mystery Tour, the album as we're listening to it today was not really, it wasn't the intended purpose of the band to release the album like that. Essentially, the band wanted to release it as an EP, which would have just been the songs from the movie. But it wasn't enough. There were too many songs to just make it one EP. And so in England, they actually released this as a double EP, which was a very rare thing to do. In the United States, however, they wanted to make it a full LP. And so on the second side, they tacked a bunch of songs that had already been released. And that's where... And so a lot of those songs were already done prior to the filming of the movie, and prior to the recording and the writing of the songs that were from the film.
They had already been released as singles, Matt?
Correct.
Songs?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And so actually, there's a whole lot of stuff going on with this time in the Beatles, much more so than the previous albums that we covered. So really, it starts with in 1966 when the Beatles stopped touring. We'll talk about that in another episode, but they decided we need a break, so they go off and do a number of different things. John Lennon goes off and films a movie with the director Richard Lester that directed their other movies. McCartney goes off and he writes a score for films. Harrison gets into meditation, and I don't know what Ringo was doing, but they take some time and then they come back into the studio to record Sgt. Pepper. But before they actually recorded Sgt. Pepper, the first 2 songs that they recorded were Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. So those songs, which are on this record on the second side, were actually intended by the band to put on Sgt. Pepper. However, the record company was getting impatient with the lack of production and really pressured the manager, Brian Epstein, to, have the band, let's get some singles out there, right? People are wondering where the Beatles are. So they're kind of forced to put out a double A-side single, which was Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. And later on, producer George Martin said it was his biggest regret of being with the band, or maybe he might have even said his entire life, was not including those songs on Sgt. Pepper. But the band was kind of the mindset, like a lot of these bands that we've talked about in the 60s, particularly in Britain, that if you release a song as a single, you don't put it on an album, right? Mm-hmm. Albums and singles are kind of separate. So so that's where the recording really began. So the second side of this is kind of an afterthought. And like I said, that was something that the Beatles didn't really like, but they were kind of forced to do that by the record company. So it's kind of it's a unique album in their catalog, because it really, what we're hearing today was not what really the band wanted to be put out there. So something else that, that was so they put out Sgt. Pepper, and that was a huge success. McCartney had the idea on the heels of that to do the film for Magical Mystery Tour. This is largely his idea. But in late August of 67, the Beatles traveled. This is when they started getting into transcendental meditation with the Maharishi, and they go to Wales. They take like a weekend off into Wales, and they go see one of the Maharishi's talks and whatnot. And they get the news there that their manager Brian Epstein died from a prescription pill overdose at the age of 32. Some actually speculated that it might have been a suicide, but it's been contested. So we're not really sure exactly if it was just an accidental overdose or if it was a suicide. But you could really mark this as the beginning of the end for the Beatles, and a lot of people do, because Epstein was, the driving force behind the band, and he was just a really, really good businessman, and and took care of them, was kind of like a father figure, and made sure that they weren't getting screwed out of deals, and and just really looked after them. So this was a very tragic moment in the band's career. McCartney then starts to rally the troops, and a few days later, in early September, the band had a meeting, and McCartney just said, "We got to go through. We got to film. We got to complete filming." And we got to put out this album. We got to keep going. We don't want to lose momentum. We don't want to use this as an excuse to fall behind. So this was a little bit to the chagrin of the other members. Harrison was a little bit, his mind was still kind of, wanting to take a break and, do more meditation stuff. Lennon didn't really have the songs ready to go, so he felt the pressure to keep up with McCartney, who had songs, and it was said that that's one of the reasons that McCartney wanted to go, is because he had the songs, and this is what he wanted to he just wanted to keep going. So the album is the soundtrack, and the movie is not something that I would recommend anybody see. It was really the first thing that the Beatles ever created that was universally panned. And this was it was originally intended to be on, and that's what it was. They actually made it a TV special, and it was broadcast on the BBC on Boxing Day, 1967. So we were approaching the 53rd anniversary of the first showing of the Magical Mystery
More
movie.
Coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. And so the film was filmed in color, but they didn't really have the technology to to show it in color. And even if they did, people had black and white TV. So it's this very colorful. If you've ever seen the movie, it's this very colorful, very, there's a lot of, a lot of imagery that would lend itself well to being in color, but people saw this for the first time in black and white, and it was just, people hated it. Yeah. It was a random set of events that were just put together. There was no rhyme or reason. It was just like, hey, who's got an idea? What do we want to do? Let's do that. Thankfully, it's only like 45 minutes long. But you do get things like there's the Lennon or McCartney said that, one of the good things about it is that, it's the only time you see a performance of I Am the Walrus. And McCartney has tried to answer for it. Everybody says it was his idea. He's like, well, I think it was kind of all our ideas, but this is really Paul. A lot of this album is Paul. The album overall was pretty well critically acclaimed, and it sold well, but the films clearly did not. But there were also plenty of critics and people that weren't big fans of this. Songs like All You Need Is Love, they found that was naive, or The Fool on the Hill was like this pretentious, overly I don't know if I want to say sappy, but self-serious. You guys are taking yourself too seriously, type of thing. So there was a good amount of disdain that some people had for this album, but overall, it's still and some people have even said they liked it better than Sgt. Pepper. You can make the argument this is the Beatles' weirdest album. It certainly has a couple. If it's not their weirdest album, they certainly have some of their weirdest songs, like Strawberry Fields, I Am the Walrus, Blue Jay Way, a George Harrison song on this, which is very bizarre. I think it's an interesting album, and it's much better than the film, and but it's also the first record that really sees the Beatles begin the downward spiral of breaking up, which is started with the death of Epstein. So I'll cut it there, I think, for right now, and maybe we can start talking about our reactions. So maybe I kind of think I know how John might feel about this. So I want to start with Josh to get your take first.
So I did watch the film. Continuing on with
I hope
the
you
tradition.
were drinking.
I was not, and the film is abysmal, and it's also it's confounding how bad it is, because they're arguably one of the most popular bands in the world, probably with unlimited resources to produce something, and they make this. It's so boring and unfocused, and even the song, arguably the music video segments of the movie are not very inspiring or original. It's basically them in an airfield driving around on a bus, and then them on other fields filming songs. It's just
pretty
not
much
entertaining.
Yeah.
Strawberry Fields forever.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't watch the movie. Just let me watch it for you, and trust that you can just listen to the album and get the gist of it, or watch segments on YouTube. I think you can watch it that way. So to the album, thank you for pointing out the fact that the back half is all singles, because I was like, wow, this back half is like one of the best back halves of I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So knowing that now, I would say that I think it's of a piece with Strawberry Fields. I definitely feel like they are being more and more experimental. You know, obviously we haven't talked about the previous 3 albums yet, to this one, but I like some of the things they're doing on this album. I think there's still catchy songs, you know, despite this being like 6 songs arguably and then 5 singles. I think Fool on the Hill is catchy. It sounds like a Paul McCartney song, if you know Paul McCartney's you know, way of writing and things. I really like Blue Jay Way. I think it's really cool how it's kind of like hazy and like slowed down tempo, and the way that Harrison sings on it, and there's probably Indian instruments on it, I'm guessing, to some extent.
There might be. It's a lot of, and what I neglected to mention too, there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of looping, you know, like playing things backwards, you know, terms like flanging and, you know, and stuff like that. So there's probably some Indian instrumentals. I didn't look that up, but yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in that song.
Yeah, I like that. I think Your Mother Should Know is another catchy McCartney song. And I Am the Walrus, I think I really like Lennon's voice on that song. I think it's probably one of my favorite Beatles songs. I haven't ranked them, but it's probably up there in the top 20 for sure. And I don't, you know, even something like Flying, which is an instrumental track, is different than what they've done before. And you can see how they are branching out on that. It's an entertaining album. I could see how, you know, coming off of Sgt. Pepper, critics and whoever would say like, well, this album's not as strong as Sgt. Pepper, but like, what album is going to be as strong as Sgt. Pepper?
Yeah.
This almost seems like, you know, it could be, you know, obviously it's not what they did, but it's almost like B-sides to Sgt. Pepper in a way, or something, or stuff that they didn't use for Sgt. Pepper. But I think it's still worthwhile and worth listening to. Is it one of the best Beatles albums ever? No, but there's still, you know, it's still good, strong Beatles work. So, so that's what I think.
All right, John.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, this album's a tale of 2 albums, right? The UK album is the worst Beatles album they ever recorded, right? The version with the single stuck on is an incredible example of what the Beatles were like in their late career, because you have some of the, in my opinion, some of the best songs the Beatles wrote in, you know, the second half of their career. I mean, you've got, you know, Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever and Hello Goodbye, All You Need Is Love. I mean, that's like a greatest hits album in its own right. But yeah, like when you know that there's an album and then there's a, you know, an album with singles attached to it, like I think you have to look at both of them. Because we are looking, I think, at this in terms of evaluating it as the US version of it, then this album is correctly placed, because the back half is a murderer's row of great songs. Right. And they are great songs. This is also definitively a Paul McCartney album, like very much a Paul McCartney album. I feel like to some degree he has influence on nearly every song. I mean, I Am the Walrus probably is the only one that John Lennon sort of stands out on as the creative force. I'm sure there are other songs that he's involved in, but you cannot really identify them as clearly as John Lennon songs as the other albums. And it's funny because we've done most of the early Beatles albums, which have clearly been, you know, collaborative, but Lennon was at the forefront. This sort of marks the period, I think, where, you know, McCartney evolves to being, in his own way, an equal to Lennon in terms of creative force for the band, which I also know plays into Matt's narrative of the band beginning to disintegrate, because that was a big piece of it. It's interesting as an album musically, because there's a lot of complex layering of tracks on this album. There's also a lot of instrumentation that's outside the norm, Eastern influence. Of course, it's hard to put it totally in context because you had like Sgt. Pepper released shortly before this, which did all of that, in a factor of 10. And I think it's fair what Matt said. Like, as it's kind of a throwaway album until you tack the tracks on, and then the tracks that you tack on at the end make it what you expect from the Beatles. And so that is what I'd say. It becomes a very good album with those tracks. And I'm struggling to go beyond that because it's hard to talk about this album without going into Sgt. Pepper's, and I don't want to steal from my take on that. But what do you think, Matt? Because, I know you tend to love the entirety of the catalog, but I have also I think that this one doesn't stand out for you as much as others.
It does in some ways and doesn't in others. It's certainly I can see it's their most unfocused record because it's just it's things just thrown together. It certainly is a more McCartney heavy. I mean, this was again McCartney, and you're right, John. The earlier parts of the Beatles, it was Lennon's taking the helm, and in the latter part of the Beatles, it's McCartney, and he's the one that's encouraging to get into the studio and encouraging them to do more things as a band. I agree the second side is stronger, but I don't dislike the first side by any stretch.
Would you not say though that like The Fool on the Hill and like Your Mother Should Know are not they are not, to me, normal standard Beatles songs. Then you throw in that there's an instrumental in there, and that's 3 of the 7 tracks, to me at least.
No, I get it, but that doesn't mean I dislike them or am I just going to throw that part away? I like The Fool on the Hill. Your mother. I like Your Mother Should Know. Yeah. Flying is the instrumental, and that's actually one of the few songs in the Beatles catalog. It might be the only that I can think of that's credited to all 4 of them. They all get writing credits on that one. But I get why people like Pan, Blue Jay Way, like it's this boring, sloggy story, and it's not even like the thing is it's like that song. The music is really kind of out there, but it's literally about George Harrison waiting for his friends to come visit. Like he's waiting for them, and I'm just waiting for you to cut. There's a fog, and I'm waiting. Please don't be long. Just come. I'll be asleep. There's no insightful, meditative, quality to that. It's just like, it's pretty simplistic. And I Am the Walrus is one of their best songs. I mean, what a freaking great song that is. That is just a fantastic achievement, and musical achievement, is particularly in the '60s of what they're doing. This is the height of the experimentation that the Beatles would be doing. I find it amazing that Lennon was trying to scrap songs together to for the movie, and he came up with that.
Yeah, really.
What a talent, The band also was doing massive amounts of LSD, and it would take forever for them to record. So, that was also going on. The recording was seen as chaotic,
which is funny because the back end of the album doesn't sound like that at all. Like I think the first half is very much a psychedelic LSD album, and the second half, to me, is a real pop
it's
album.
More poppy. Or Strawberry Fields, you're kind of getting a little out there, but
but not as much as the first half, I'd say. A little bit, but like Sgt. Pepper.
No, well, I mean that was the song that started Sgt. Pepper too, though. You have to remember,
right,
so it was like right around the same time. So
fair enough.
There's actually a couple of my least favorite songs on this are actually on this. Well, it's Hello Goodbye. I've never been a huge fan of. I like the end of it.
It's funny because that's my favorite song on the album.
No, it seems I don't know. I'm wanting a little bit more from that. The lyrics are. I'm surprised you like that because the lyrics seem pretty dumb to me, John.
I like how it sounds. I think it sounds really good. Like the structure of the song. To me, it's like it's a song that shows the Beatles' ear for sonic quality. Yeah, it's certainly not a heavyweight song lyrically, but the layering of the song and the production, I think, is excellent.
I think you get more. I would say you get more of that in Penny Lane, because that's like one of the. I mean, and Penny Lane was and that's the thing. Those were the A sides. The Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields. They're both like very much autobiographical in terms of it's about their McCartney's youth and Lennon's youth growing up in Liverpool. And that was why that was an interesting juxtaposition when they released those as double A-sides, because you've got the weirdness of Strawberry Fields and just like that with the you should read the Wikipedia page on that and how long it took them to record it and all the stuff that they did. And it's that version that you get is like it's several different takes looped together, and they were recorded at different speeds, and that's why you hear that tone that Martin does. It's like, and he does that to try to connect everything together, and it just is this weird amalgamation of this crazy song. And then you have Penny Lane, which is like this soaring pop chorus of like this very upbeat type song.
I would definitely agree with you on Strawberry Fields Forever in terms of the production. I actually don't think Penny Lane as a production piece is necessarily like a better counterpoint to Hello Goodbye. You know, I think they're kind of doing the same thing.
Well, I'm talking more about the music, right? I think that's a much better melody. I think you've got the piccolo trumpet, which I didn't realize that's what that instrument is, that doing the solo at the end. That's a unique sound. My biggest problem with that song has been, and it doesn't happen all the time, and it's really weird, but there's certain times I listen to that song and the bass is way too up front in the mixing, and it's almost overpowering. But there's other times I listen to it, and maybe it depends on the speakers that I'm listening on or how I'm listening to it, but there's other times where I don't notice that as much. So I find that very interesting about that song.
It's funny you say that, because that's how I think of Penny Lane. I actually don't think it's that well-produced a song for the Beatles, and the Beatles have so many well-produced songs that it has always stood out to me as a song that didn't ever see. That's why I was surprised you picked it, because I was like, that's actually one that I've never felt was particularly well mixed.
I think that to me, that song is it's about the structure of the song and the melody, and that's an interesting point about the production. But there's sometimes where the bass is just too much. But I love All You Need Is Love. So people call that a cheesy kind of song, but that's I don't know. It's just I really like what they do at the end. Again, lyrics aren't all that spectacular, but it's just a very great simple song, so it's not my favorite album. But I think the strong parts of this record are as almost as good as the Beatles get. Strawberry Fields might be my favorite song from the Beatles, period. Right? It's certainly right up there. I Am the Walrus is great. I know this. You're right, John. This is more of a McCartney album, but I like the Lennons. I'm more of a Lennon guy, and I think Baby You're a Rich Man is a great Beatles deep cut. I've always liked that song. Yeah. And did you know who covers that? The Fat Boys did a cover of "Baby You're a Rich Man," and apparently they did a cover. It was featured in their film Disorderlies. So you can go listen to it on Spotify. It sounds just like you would think it was a Fat Boy beatboxing and stuff. So it's interesting. I get why people might not like it as much. But I'm not even gonna knock the first half, John. I think that stuff. I get why that's not as good, but I still enjoy it.
Can I add to like my previous take on this a little bit? Like, and I think I just stumbled into this take a little bit because of your take on Hello Goodbye. Like, I know that like Beatles aficionados and critics don't like Hello Goodbye. And I'm not going to die on a hill because I don't think it's one of my favorite songs. But I think the reason that critics don't like that song is because it's straightforward. And like, but it became sort of like a narrative, I think. And that song has conga drums, bongos, tambourine, all kinds of stuff on it. And it's just it's a more straightforward written song. And once again, I just think it's like it's just an example, you know what I mean, of like, this is what it's supposed to be and this is what it's not supposed to be. But the ear test for me says all these songs are good, but you almost have to take the one that is unambitious, right? And to me, it's like, what does unambitious mean? Does it mean that like it's a pop song that's really good? I don't know. Maybe I'm on that track a little bit right now, but that's kind of how I look at it. So.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, to your points, Fool on the Hill and Your Mother Should Know aren't exactly complex lyrically either. They're pretty straightforward songs in the vein of Hello Goodbye, but they're also catchy. So I think they pass that ear test also.
I don't dislike those either. It's just Hello Goodbye never. I know that's a song that was a big single too. That's a very popular song, and I think that that's
kind of what I get back to. It's like probably biggest single in some ways off of it, not retrospectively, you know, when people look at it, but
Nope, at the time.
it was the A-side, right, to I Am the Walrus, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was another
I know
Lennon
was infuriated, and I think that's what happened. People were like, I agree with Lennon, it's way more, and it's so a narrative gets created, right? I Am the Walrus is genius and Hello Goodbye sucks, but like the radio buying public and the people that do this like clearly heard it, and that's where sometimes I like roll my eyes, because it's like they can both be good, but like the idea that one is hidden genius and one is not, I just think there's a lot of that with music in general, but with the Beatles in particular. And as much as I love the John Lennon stuff, I do think that Lennon's narrative sometimes isn't fair to the rest of the group, you know?
Yeah, and I think that that's probably, and I would say this about other songs and bands and artists too, like if somebody's really into something, or if it's a really popular song or a popular album or whatever, and I am just okay with it, I'm going to dislike it maybe more so, just because I'm like, I don't get why this is the song that's doing it for everybody when there's this other stuff that's going on. You know what I mean? And so I think I get a little bit of that with Hello Goodbye. I can't say that's overplayed, because I mean all the Beatles songs are I feel like are played in equal amounts a lot of times. And it's I'm just indicating that that's probably one of the songs on here I like the least. But if you're saying that's still a pretty damn good album. You know, so so it's I think this is an interesting one. It's certainly strange, and I encourage people to listen to every Beatles album, you know, because they're all freaking great. I think it's also interesting that this is the time period where, you know, there's other stories where people started kind of, you know, fans of the Beatles started kind of feeling a little, you know, that they were kind of questioning the direction that the band was going in, because it's not like everybody loved everything that they did. And I think one of the things that I found funny was when they went on American Bandstand and Dick Clark, and, you know, because they did promo films. That's the other thing too, with like Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever. They did promotional films, which are now music videos, and that's how the Beatles would send their stuff out rather than touring. And so they would send these out, and it was noted that a lot of the female fans who had been in years past screaming and going nuts seeing the Mop Tops, just looking at their handlebar mustaches and their kind of weird hairdos and starting to not be as attracted to the Beatles anymore. You know, they're like, they're a little weird, they're a little ugly, you know. So that kind of made people turn at least the females off. So, and the other thing I want to point out is around this time, I want to kind of bring this into other Beatles things that we covered, but it's when you're researching the Beatles, first of all, there's so much. Their Wikipedia pages are ridiculous, and even though I know a lot about them, it's just like when I'm reading through this, I'm like, holy crap! It's just people love writing about them. But the whole Paul is dead conspiracy theory. Do you guys are you familiar with that? With all the clues,
there was like you played it backwards, right? The album.
So the short of it is the short of it is like in 1960 people started feeling that once the Beatles stopped touring and then they started doing these weird albums and they weren't really being seen anymore, there was a conspiracy theory that started in 1967 that said that Paul McCartney in 1966 got into an argument with the band, drove home angry, and got decapitated in a car accident. So the band, in order to like not lose momentum and popularity, decided to have some sort of contest where they hired a lookalike that could stand in for Paul. But they felt bad about doing that and lying to the fans, so they would incorporate messages into album covers and songs that would, you know, kind of clue in the fans as to what was really going on. And this really took off like almost after the Beatles broke up, because there was people that, you know, really felt that the Beatles were covering up the fact that Paul McCartney was dead. So the Paul is dead references that you get on Magical Mystery Tour include at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever, Lennon says what people felt sounded like Paul is dead. Or no, I'm sorry, I buried Paul is what he says at the end of the song. Really what Lennon is saying is cranberry sauce. He also... Yeah.
So the Beatles trolling their fans then? They just said, no,
They
Paul's
had-
alive. He's right here.
They had no, because that was one of those things that it's almost like today. It's like, you know, like you present the proof, like here's Paul, and people don't believe that it's him. You know, they believe that they replaced him with a guy named Billy Shears, and Ringo's like, this is ridiculous. He goes, there's no way for us to prove that Paul's alive because no matter what I do, nobody's going to believe it. You know.
What?
The other thing is because the cover of Magical Mystery Tour, it's their first album, might be their only album where their faces you can't see. Well, not the White Album because there's no faces on that, but the first album where you can't see their faces, and so they figure, well, that's because he's actually dead, so they're covering up his face.
Oh my
and the
God.
guy that's wearing the black monkey, the walrus, sorry, the black walrus, that's the sign of death. You know what I mean? So they had
Oh my
all these
God.
things that were kind of brewing up that people thought that Paul
It's making
was
my
dead.
head hurt just hearing this. You know,
John,
like,
it's history, man. So
yeah, whatever. It's not interesting. Well, it's interesting, but it's like also like, you know, in a world of conspiracy theories, you know what I mean? It's like I don't know if it's nice or if it's fitting that like this stuff's always been around. So
it's oddly enough, like I kind of take some comfort in the fact that it's always kind of been like this. It's like it's not just new now. We've always been doing dumb shit. So like, you know, it's part of our nature, you know.
Yeah, I
so there's
suppose.
solidarity there, I guess. But anyway, oh, and Josh, one more thing. Did you notice in the film when they were doing the Blue Jay Way, the flying montage, there were clips from Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove that they used in that part of the
okay.
film. I don't know if you picked
Nice.
up on that.
I did
so.
not. Well, Strangelove's in black and white, so I guess that would be a tell in watching the color version.
From where it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
all
I
right.
recommend go listen to it.
I also
But
recommend.
stay away from the movie. I can't believe Josh, I told you not to go see the movie, and you're like, no.
I have to do it. It's just the completest in me.
Is that zero trash bags, Josh? For
I think I rated it 1 star.
what gets 0 stars then?
Nothing gets. I mean, I have to like not watch a movie, not finish a movie, probably to get 0 stars.
Okay.